Hello, Booktube. It's Marilyn. And if you've read the title, you know that I'm doing something I've never done in my 4 years of being a booktuber, and that is combining 2 months together. And it's been quite an experience. I know you're tired of hearing, you might be tired of hearing how I hurt my knee in March. And I want to bring you into that evolution of how it has changed my reading, but I have some goodies for you too. And coincidentally, the way that I've been reading and the books that I'm going to show you match up with a lot of the events that are happening in May and June. So that is fun, I think, and I think you'll enjoy some of the books I'm going to show you. When this first happened, I couldn't read at all. I was in that much pain. So I turned to my old standby, which are magazines. And one of the events that is actually one of my events, Mental Health May, that me and Kim of Middle of the Book March do every year. And we're really taking it slow this year. But a lot of the reading that I was doing were magazines. Now, magazines are something that have always been very important in my reading. First of all, before I could purchase books, before I had money to purchase books, I always had money for magazines, which were much less expensive than they are now. And a few months ago, maybe even a year ago, I got this book, magazine, which is the Complete Guide to Mental Health. And I showed it to you a long time ago, but I needed to start reading this. And it's Be Kind to Your Mind, Relieve Stress, Fight Depression. I can't say that they addressed all of the issues that I wanted them to deal with, that I was looking for at the time, but it was a good way back to reading again when I just couldn't concentrate enough to pick up a book. So I wanted to show you that. And more recently, I was able to actually browse in a library for the first time in a long time. And in this particular library, which is next door to my physical therapy place, I thought this was a new magazine. It's National Geographic, looks brand new, like no one ever read it. And I was really attracted by the title, which is The End of Night, Why We Need Darkness. And after I looked at all, it's a wonderful magazine. I thought it was a new magazine, and it says November 2008, which really surprised me. But as I was looking at it, I was attracted to the title, The End of Night, and Why We Need Darkness, and how the light pollution is affecting us. And I'll just show you some of the beautiful photos that show our vanishing night. And read you some of the what it says about lighting the world. And here's a picture of how some of the world is not as light as other parts, at least in 2008, how pollution. And I want to show you one picture. It says, of all the pollutions we face, light pollution is perhaps the most easily remedied. That's remedied, sorry. And at the end of they talk about how, and here's a picture of the Mormon temple and how the whole purpose of it, of making that temple, was to make it like a beacon of light in the darkness. So that was interesting. And at the end of the article, the person who wrote the article is Verlin Kinkenbird. And they say, in the end, humans are no less trapped by light pollution than the frogs in a pond near a brightly lit highway. Living in a glare of our own making, we have cut ourselves off from our evolutionary and cultural patrimony, the light of the stars and the rhythms of day and night. In a very real sense, light pollution causes us to lose sight of our true place in the universe, to forget the scale of our being, which is best measured against the dimensions of a deep night, with the Milky Way, the edge of our galaxy, arching overhead. And it makes me think of Hawaii and how in my house, I can look up and still see the stars, which in a lot of cities, that is impossible. But beside this article that made me pick up this free magazine, by the way, there were wonderful, I didn't even know that this was an old magazine, because one of the articles is Borneo's Moment of Truth. And after I read this, now National Geographic always has gorgeous photos, and they're talking about how the people of Borneo, who withstood so much to their culture that they're still here, are suffering not because of the things that they used to suffer from, but because of the vanishing forests and because of the modern society encroaching upon their land. And I started wondering whether this has, and here's a beautiful photo. They always have beautiful photos of people living in their culture, trying to keep their culture. Anyway, so I started reading magazines when this happened, and I found this an easy way of getting into reading again. And then, of course, my read along with two people, Denise and Jack, of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I have to do a dedicated book review of this book eventually, but there's so much in here that affected me emotionally, that made me cry, that I need to share with you just a few, or just maybe one thing that stood out to me. Now, this book takes place at the turn of the century, 1900. And in fact, Betty Smith goes into great detail about what year this happened, what year that happened. And she even mentions, and I'm paraphrasing, but in the year 2012 and 13, the New York City schools were like how she describes it, where they gave very cruel to the people from poor neighborhoods, how they treated them, and how the school was meant, that Francie went to, was meant for 1,000 children, and they crowded in 3,000 children, how the teachers were not kind to the poorer children, and how they couldn't use the restroom when they wanted to. I mean, really horrible things. And that brought back to me that even when my mother went to school in the New York, Brooklyn school system, just as Francie did, and that was maybe in the 1920s, there was still a lot of bad things happening. Maybe there wasn't the real beatings that happened in the principal's office as they did in Francie's time, but my mother was left-handed, and she always told me that the teachers were so cruel to her, making her use her right hand instead of her left hand, that they would take a really hard ruler and hit her over and over until she used her right hand, and how this caused her mental illness to exasperate, let's put it that way, because she always did suffer. And also about using the bathroom was a little bit better when I went to school in the 50s, but it was still a thing where you had to raise your hand, and sometimes the teacher didn't recognize you. And there were children, especially I remember children who were the Puerto Rican children who didn't speak English. At that time they were mostly Puerto Rican, Spanish people. And there would be floods on the floor that the teachers would like ignore. So the children suffered as they did in this book. And I have found so many, it's been an excavation, I've said to other booktubers, of my own background, of my own streets, of my own neighborhood, and how it changed between 1910, 20, and in the 50s when I started school. And I still remember things that were mentioned in this book because I'm old enough. And I'm just having a wonderful conversation about this book with the two other people that I mentioned. Like I said, I'll have their Denise and Jack, their booktube channels down in the description box. But I am having such an emotional experience with this book, and so are the people that are reading with me for different reasons. And that is what's so wonderful about the book. Also that she was able, Betty Smith, to write for both females and the problems that they were having during that time, and how men were suffering as well. And it all came down to, in her view, poverty. Poverty due to lack of education. Now, I think looking back at it, it was more complicated than that, but she had the right idea for sure, and she's really was a wonderful writer. I just love her style of writing. Anyway, so I was really busy with that when I started back to reading. And then I found a book, and I couldn't find that there's an event for it on Booktube, but it is a thing, and it's called Reading Wales 25. Now, I'm not sure if it's an Instagram thing or I just happened to find it, and I have a wonderful book that has to do with a few events that are actually happening on Booktube these 2 months, May and June. Now, I got this one from the library, and it's called The Wheel Spins. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous cover. The train, the colors. Now, why is it a Wales book? Because Ethel Lina White was Welsh, and she wrote this book in 1932. Let me just check if I'm right. Yeah, and no, I think she wrote this book in 1936. It's another book I'm going to talk about that's 1932. But this is the golden age of mysteries. And Alfred Hitchcock, somebody who is very well known in the 50s, that he had Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He was scary. Okay, so when I started reading this book, not knowing anything about Ethel Lina White, I felt that this was a good fit in a way for horror mayhem, which I'll get, I should tell you right now that horror mayhem was started by a good friend of mine, Scott and Becky Bryant. And we lost Scott last year, and his wife, Becky, now has her channel back up. And I did my first read-along of a mystery, not of a horror book, because it's not that I'd never read horror, stories like Edgar Allan Poe and other, scary books, but I was scared when I started this book, and it says right here that adapted for film by Alfred Hitchcock as The Lady Vanishes. And they said it was lightly adapted, but I definitely want to see that movie if I haven't seen it already. I might have seen it already. And if you've either read this book or seen it, the movie, let me know. Now it says here that this is published by the Poison Pen Press in association with the British Library. And I am stunned by this book. I'm not saying it's a total horror book or a total mystery book, but it has elements of both. It's very suspenseful. So this is a 5-star read. I just finished it. And of course, I had to see what else Ethel Lina White wrote. Now, I'm going to have it over here. A book that went higher on somebody's list than this one is Fear Stalks the Village. And that was written in 1932. Like I said, I'll try to find a cover. I couldn't find it at my library, but I definitely am going to be looking for it, because this is the kind of book I want to read on vacation. And it also made me change my mind about taking my Kindle, which I said I wasn't going to take my Kindle on vacation. But if I can find, and I'm looking at you, Nathan, my subscriber, if you have any of Ethel Lina White's books, please let me know, because these are the kind of books that I would want to read on a vacation, on a plane. So what is The Wheel Spins about? And this was first published in 1936, like I said, and it's a suspenseful mystery, her best known novel, and it's about a very selfish young woman, Iris Carr. And from the beginning of the book, she has kind of ditched her group of very selfish friends, and she's walking up a mountain and has a scary experience. So you're brought into the suspense right away. And when she gets on the train, well, let's just say a lady vanishes. And, I figured out sort of what was going on. I'm not going to say that it's, maybe I figured it out because I watched the movie, but it is very entertaining, not only on a mystery level or a horror level or even a suspenseful level. It's interesting because it shows you the time frame of the early 30s and what it was like to go to maybe a Austrian village. I don't think it's really explained exactly where they were and how the political system was working at that time. That's part of it, the early 30s. And if you're interested in that time period, and I think all her books are, and in the other book, not the one I told you, Fear Stalks the Village, which I don't know anything about right now, except I want to read it. There's another book that says, don't read it in the dark. So definitely her books might be a good fit for horror mayhem, as well as helping my mental health anyway, so mental health me. And let me know if you've read anything by Ethel Lina White. I've read a few Welsh novelists, and I've always been very interested in the Welsh musical language that they write in. Okay, so what else? What am I going to read? What might I read that might fit into an event? Well, I just got this book that I had to wait for from the library. Now, I had talked about in April how I was reading a lot about Dylan. And this book I had to wait for because it actually was based on the movie I saw, Complete Unknown. And it says, Dylan Goes Electric, Newport, Seeger, Dylan, and the Night That Split the 60s. Now, it's not a very big surprise that the night that split the 60s were when Dylan decided to go electric. And it says that Elijah Wald's book reflects the many directions in which America's music scene evolved in those extraordinary years, 1963 to 1970. I can't recommend it enough, and I'm really looking forward to it. And on the evening of July 25th, 65, Bob Dylan took the stage at the Newport Folk Festival, backed by an electric band, and roared into a blistering version of Maggie's Farm, followed by his new rock single, Like a Rolling Stone. The audience of committed folk purists and political activists who had hailed him as their acoustic prophet, reacted with a mix of shock, booing, and scattered cheers. And the movie was great. I recommend it. And I think this book is going to be great too. Now, on another level, I've been really listening to a lot of music from the 60s lately as I was healing, am still healing from my knee injury. And I watched a video of one of my favorite, Bob Dylan was not one of my favorite, I guess I was a little young when he started to, but also in the late 60s, Melanie, who was more my age, who sadly passed away. And I was just watching a video of her singing, "Mama, Mama, I think you've raised me wrong." And I burst out crying. And it wasn't only because how beautiful the song is, how heartfelt she sang it and wrote it, but also brought back memories of when I was a teenager at that time. And that's something that I've been doing a lot of, is listening to music when I couldn't read. But if you're a Melanie fan, please let me know down below, because Melanie and Janis Joplin were my two, and they weren't that much alike. And of course later I liked Stevie Nicks, but that's another story. But Bob Dylan is an enigma, and I want to learn more about that folk sing, because I loved folk music. I still love folk music, because when you think of folk music, it comes from folks like you and me, you know. And I've never been to the Newport Jazz Festival, but I want to read it and be there in spirit. I should mention also that, back to the wheel spins, that there's another event that's happening. It's called Reading the Globe, and it's my good friend Katja and Rose. Now, Katja is Turning Pages with Katja, and I'll have that down below, and Roz from Scaladelling about the books. So I think this would fit for reading around the globe, because Wales is a country I want to know more about. Though it's not, this is not in translation. I'm not sure if they're, the books have to be in translation, because I know I was watching, I think it was Katja's channel, where they were doing a book that was not exactly a book in translation, but it was from another country. But anyway, I'm putting it down. And another book that I'm reading, that I'm actively reading now, is The Piano Lesson by August Wilson. I talked about it in my last video. And this is an event, endless reading, endless drama. And I think that reading plays is a very different experience than reading a novel. And I always loved plays. I loved watching plays. And then I always took the plays, try to find a book of plays. And, you know, I was a wannabe actress, so I would act it out. And I just started this book, and it brought me back to my friends, to the way people I knew in real life in the 50s in the project spoke. And it brought me back. Now, I know a lot of people might have, some people might, it might take them a while to get used to the specific dialogue, dialect too. But for me, it was very familiar, and I can tell this is a very important book. Even only reading 3 lines of it, it won the Pulitzer Prize. It says, the play's real music is in the language. And as it says, it's about a piano, but it's not really about a piano. It's about how we keep our culture, despite how we keep, well, I should say, how people of certain backgrounds, and in this case it's the African American experience, fight to keep their culture and background despite not having a lot of money. So, so it says here, at the heart of the play stands the ornately carved upright piano, which, as the Charles family prized hard-won possession, has been gathering dust in the parlor of Bernice Charles' Pittsburgh home. So in the beginning of the book, boy Willie, her brother, bursts into her life with his dream of buying the same Mississippi land that his family had worked as slaves, and he plans to sell this piano. But Bernice refuses to sell, clinging to the piano as a reminder of the history that is their family legacy. The dilemma is the real piano lesson, reminding us that blacks are often deprived both of the symbols of their past and an opportunity in the present. Just a wonderful way that August Wilson uses language. I loved all of his plays that I've read. Actually started reading them when I went back to college in the when I was in my late 30s in Minnesota, where he has ties also. He has stronger ties in Pittsburgh, like I said before, but he did, I think, either have a job as maybe a college professor in Minnesota at some point. I'm not sure exactly how his ties to Minnesota came about, but if you know, let me know in the comments. I should know because I lived in Minnesota for 5 years while going to school. Okay, so what else? All right. Now, there's another readathon that's not really a readathon, and it's called Joy Reading June. And this is in honor of a booktuber we lost last year. And she was a good friend of mine, just through Booktube. I didn't know her personally. And that's Alice of Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Now, Jack did an announcement video, Jack of Spread Book Joy, where they're going to recreate Alice's idea. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to do her own joy reading because she passed away near her birthday in June. And what it is just not having a TBR and reading whatever you want to read in June. But I am going to read, finally, The Pale Horse. And I'm not going to read it in this form. I'm going to read it because Alice loved Agatha Christie that much, and I'm doing it in her honor. And I bought this at Shakespeare and Company in Paris, and I'm going to read it on my Kindle. And I was told this might not be Agatha Christie's best book, but when I think of Agatha Christie, who's one of my favorite mystery writers, I also think of Alice. And and Agatha Christie gives me joy. Alice's videos gave me joy, and many recommendations, and this is one of them. Though I'm not sure she recommended this particular book, but just her Agatha Christie, love of Agatha Christie. So what is it about? When an elderly priest is murdered, the killer searches the victim so roughly that his already ragged cassock is torn in the process. What was the killer looking for? So I'm going to read this on Kindle, probably on my trip, and also think of Alice. Now, what else did I do beside reading books when I couldn't read? And here's where my vacation comes in. Now, I organized this vacation to celebrate my 75th birthday in August, and didn't want to travel in August. So I did it in June. Of course, when I injured my knee, it was because I was trying to get ready physically for it, and I overdid it, like I overdo a lot of things. But I found this planner organizer that I brought 2 years ago when I last visited Europe. And I haven't written anything in this book because, now, I just didn't want to bring a book this size. And what I would do was jot these ideas in my moleskin book. Now, moleskin books are very popular with writers because you can put them, I think Hemingway, and I'm not a big fan of Hemingway, but put the moleskin in his back pocket, and when he thought of something, that perfect sentence, he would write it in the moleskin notebook. And I think that I am going to do the same thing. But I love this book. First of all, the planner organizer has something that always made me think of travel, which is suitcases, and this particular kind of suitcase that makes me think of fancy travel, the trunk. You think of it as Murder on the Orient Express, when everyone was taking their trunks out, and you don't see that too much lately, or at all. I certainly am not bringing a trunk, but I'm not giving this book up, and I'm going to write in it because I love to plan vacations. I really do. But I probably am going to end up taking the moleskin of my favorite restaurants, what I want to do. And of course, on my vacation, I'm going to Paris, a few days in London, and then taking the Queen Mary to Brooklyn for a few days, and maybe seeing my sister. It's a big trip. I'm not going to lie, I'm scared. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to be doing many videos in June. I hope to do some shorts, though, and show you where I'm going. My daughter is good at that. But I just hope I make it in one piece. And I think I will. So let me know what you're reading in May and June. Does it coincide with any events that are happening? And please send your good wishes that I do make it in one piece, because I am planning to see Jack of Spread Book Joy in London, and I'm also going to watch the play of The Mousetrap. And I've never read The Mousetrap, I told you in the my last video. And I'm also reading another Agatha Christie to get in readiness for it, and that is The 10 Little Indians, which of course is And Then There Were None, but it's in play format. And I got this at a library book sale, a mystery play in 3 acts, as well as The Mousetrap, and a few of her other plays were performed in different places on the West End. And my daughter and I are also going to see Wicked, because she is a Wicked aficionada, and said she had to we had to get tickets for that. So I'm looking forward to my trip. I won't be able to walk much, but you know, there's always Uber and those nice big taxis in London, and I was lucky enough to be able to walk up the Notre Dame Tower of 700 steps 15 years ago. So I don't have to do the things that are normally touristic. I can just enjoy savoring a place. And I plan to. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you're reading in the comments if you read any of these books, especially the Lina White books, because I'm really excited about getting into that world of the 1930s and that feeling of the Murder of the Orient Express, feeling of those Golden Age mysteries that are have a little scariness to them. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Aloha, friends.